Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And the 2036 season is about to get underway. We went over the preseason predictions at the end of the last episode. Our A's are projected to win 87 games this upcoming year, which is certainly respectable. Unfortunately, even those 87 wins are expected to leave the A's one game out of the final wild card spot in the American League. So after having a 100-win prediction a year ago that we dramatically underperformed on when we missed the playoffs for the first time in 5 years, my hope is that our Oakland A's may be underestimated this year. We've got 2 owner goals for the season: to have a winning record and to improve our starting pitcher's ERA from 12th in the league a year ago, which was pretty much as bad as it's ever been since we took over the A's 12 plus seasons ago. My hope is we achieve both of those goals easily and certainly expect to get this team back into the playoffs. One big addition to the lineup this year is Juan Ramos. We traded for him from Seattle last year. He missed the entire season due to an injury, but he will be plugging into the middle of our order, hopefully filling the role that was handled so capably by Colt Keith for many seasons, and then more recently last year by our rental Luis Lujan. Rodney Mesidor, who we picked up in the trade for Colt Keith, is penciled in as our starting third baseman to start the season. Otherwise, there's a lot of relatively familiar names in our starting lineup. Pitching-wise, we traded for Sergio Campos this offseason, hoping he can become a competent middle-of-the-rotation type starter for us. We're giving a chance to Zach Deed, a Rule 5 acquisition that we picked up from the Red Sox. Really like his stuff, but are very worried about the number of home runs and walks that he might give up. We also added Kamani O'Banner as a reliever this past offseason, expecting big things from him as well. And the top prospect in our organization, Doug Weiss, is a guy we drafted as a reliever out of Austin P a couple of years ago, or I guess 3 years ago at this point in 2033. Drafted him as a reliever with 40 stamina and only a 2-pitch arsenal. Had a fantastic result in the development lab a couple of off seasons ago when he developed that changeup that is now his best pitch. So he is on track to, we think, become a pretty solid starter. However, given that he now views himself as a starter, even though he has pitched only 14 games at the AAA level, he's pretty impressed with his value. Looking for over $140 million if we were to sign him to a 10-year contract, given that he is a bit old for someone who's going to be a rookie this year at 24. He's fragile physically, and he's looking for all of that money, and we haven't actually seen him face Major League pitching yet. I think right now we're inclined to just let him play through his minimum and arbitration eligible years with Oakland, and then when he's in his early 30s and eventually eligible for free agency, kind of figure out what, if anything, we want to do with him at that point. So another part of the reason he's in the minors is hopefully we can manipulate his service time a bit and ensure that we get about 6.5 years in the majors from him before we have to potentially let him hit free agency. It's not inconceivable that Weiss's price might come down at some point and we still can get him locked up to a long-term contract. But right now, if Zach Deed struggles, it's very conceivable that Weiss could be up in the not-too-distant future, or we could slide O'Banner, Garland, or Jamie DeVore, all of whom have starting pitching experience at the major league level, into the back end of the rotation as well, as we try to ensure that our starting pitchers are better this year than a year ago. Only one guy on the IL, Chris Carl, with a strained back. Just put him there really to be conservative. It's not going to have a huge impact on him, but given that we had some interesting decisions to make with our pitchers, and we wanted to at least see what Deed could do in a couple of starts. Decided to put Carl on the IL. Arturo Uresti is our only other top 50 prospect. He's going to start this year in Double-A. He did pretty well there last year in only 154 at-bats. Likely will spend a couple of months in Double-A, then we'll promote him to Triple-A. He's going to be turning 23 years old shortly, and it's very conceivable that the prized IAFA signing from 2030 could be ready to make his major league debut this September. And with guys like Brady Harris, in all probability headed to free agency after this year, the timing of Uresti hopefully being able to come up to the majors and hopefully hit some home runs for us is not bad at this point. Interestingly, our farm system is slipped to be ranked 20th overall. You can see Weiss and Uresti, who we talked about, are our only two top 50 prospects. Ernesto Comunez, international amateur free agent from a year ago, is going to be making his rookie ball debut. And Darnell Selvey, first-round pick from this past season, are the only other top 100 prospects in our organization as we begin this 2036 season. And with that, it's time to get things underway. Hopefully we can get the season off to a pretty solid start. I've taken a look at the waiver wire offline. Nothing all that interesting on it as far as I'm concerned. I like our roster, even if the experts around baseball don't predict that we're going to make the playoffs this year. I feel like we'll definitely have another winning season, and when all is said and done, I think we can get this team back into the playoffs, and we are in a pretty good financial position right now, although we have the 29th budget and the 26th player payroll, neither of which is particularly impressive. We do have some money available to bring on some help as we get closer to the trade deadline, so certainly if there's a big-time starting pitcher in the final year of his contract who ends up on the trade block, or a bat that could potentially really help push our offense to another level, those are the kind of players we'll likely be looking for over the next few months. And we got a 6-2 victory over Seattle on opening day, so that was very positive. Always good to get the season off to a good start. Unfortunately, we lost the reliever Mike Curtis to a strained forearm for 6 to 7 weeks. We've got enough depth in the organization, I think, especially for the bullpen, and we should have Chris Carl back hopefully in about a week and a half or so. So not going to be the end of the world, but we were hoping that Curtis in a setup role this year would be a lot more effective than he was his first season in Oakland, where he ended up making a couple trips down to AAA because he had been so ineffective for us, despite ratings and a profile that we thought would perform fairly well at the major league level. And to fill Curtis' spot on the rotation, we brought back Rodolfo Quintanilla, a guy who has been with us for the last season and a half. Still had one option year left, so we stashed him in the minors, but he's been a solid major league pitcher in the opportunities he's had with us, 49 games working out of the bullpen over the last couple of years. So think that he's certainly a guy who can give us a respectable performance over the next few weeks until we perhaps need to make another decision around our pitching staff. And the first couple weeks of the season have been kind of meh. A 7-7 record. We're kind of just hanging in there. Unfortunately, the injured list is getting bigger and bigger. Not huge injuries, but just stuff that seems to be lingering. Obviously, Carl, we knew, was on the list. His injury time is still unknown at this point. Mike Curtis, 4 to 5 weeks away. Andy Brailovsky's been trying to play through a strained back, but his injury time is unknown at this point, and we're just going to be conservative with him and put him onto the IL as well. And Kamani O'Banner, who's done a nice job for us over his first 6 games in Oakland, has a sore elbow. going to impact him for about 4 weeks, so we placed him on the IL as well. Brought up Nehemiah Mulligan, who had been doing really well in his introduction to AAA. More of a glove than a bat, but gives us a little more defensive versatility. Brought him up to replace Brailovsky. And pitching-wise, a familiar name that hasn't worked out the way we would have hoped, but Jaheim Pennyman's going to be brought up as a long reliever and a mop-up guy. Former second overall pick, missed all of last year and a good chunk of 2034 with a significant injury. Now 26 years old, started a couple games for us in AAA. Basically has a 4A profile, good personality, and a guy that obviously we invested a lot in terms of the draft and the development lab over these past several seasons since we picked him, but he's basically a replacement level kind of guy now. But since he's already on the 40-man roster, we're going to give him the opportunity to see if he can perhaps help us out a little bit at the major league level as we just try to kind of keep things together with some of these injuries. And Chris Carl is ready to come off the IL. He really hasn't missed that much time. It was late March when his minor issue popped up, but we are going to just throw him on a rehab assignment very briefly, even though he probably could go right back on the major league roster. The reason is that we're going to try to give Zach Deed one more start. His first 2 starts with us have been exactly what we feared. 2 home runs and 8 walks allowed in just 7 innings pitched. ERA of close to 13. Certainly has added up to being a below replacement level pitcher with a ugly 32 ERA plus and a just as ugly 195 FIP minus. May give him one more start before we send him back to the Boston organization. He actually probably will get skipped in the rotation since we finally got our first off day of the season today, so it might be a while before he gets his second start at this point, or more realistically, probably 6 days from now. So no guarantees that we won't make a roster move before then and move on from him. 2 starts seems like a really small sample size, but given that sample size has kind of been everything we feared with Zach Deed, unless we see significant improvement his 3rd time around, probably will be time to thank him for giving it a try with us and send him back to the Boston organization. And we didn't get a 3rd start out of Zach Deed. He lost again in 10 innings pitched, allowed 3 hits and 8 walks. So although he allowed another home run in the 3 innings he pitched, he didn't actually walk anybody. But that 12.60 ERA and that profile with the below average movement, well below average ability to keep the ball in the park, and below average control doesn't seem to be working as a right-handed pitcher particularly well for the Oakland A's. I'm not sure how many games he's actually pitched at home at this point. 1 game at home where he had an ERA of close to 10, 2 games on the road with an ERA of over 14. So it's not gone well either way, only going 3+ innings a start for us because he's getting racked so badly. So we are going to send Mr. Deed back to the Boston Red Sox organization, and we will bring Mr. Carl back onto the Major League roster and then decide who's going to fill in as our new number 5 starter, because the first 4 have actually been doing pretty respectably thus far this year, but Deed certainly hasn't been helping in terms of improving our starter ERA. And with Carl back on the roster, we're going to give Bobby Garland a chance. He's another guy whose control isn't that great. That said, he pitched very well for us a year ago, including 5 starts towards the end of the year. And he's pitched good for us thus far this season. Former 4th-round pick, would give us a second left-handed arm in the rotation behind Ferris. So over the near term, Garland is going to get the opportunity. Take a look at what Doug Weiss is doing down in AAA, 0-1 with a 3.77 ERA. Probably just a service time issue with him. Will be interesting to see if we get an updated scouting report on him, and maybe he'll have had some advancement in terms of his stuff over the first month of the season when we get to the May 1st scouting reports. But even with that below average stuff, with his really good movement, above average control, if he kind of keeps pitching reasonably well in AAA, he could certainly be an option to join us in the majors in the not too distant future. And unfortunately, the injuries just keep coming. The right-handed reliever we picked up this past off-season, Kamani Banner, still going to be banged up for another couple weeks. And the lefty reliever, Chisin Harimoto, who we signed this off-season, also now banged up. 4 ERA over 13 and a third innings. Has struck out 17 in that time frame while walking 7. Certainly hasn't been perfect. Trying to use him primarily as a lefty specialist. So we will send Harimoto onto the IL, where he'll be gone for a few weeks, and hopefully we can hold this thing together. You can see just over 500, 11-10, but we're already 5 games behind in the division. No surprise at all to see the mighty Texas Rangers way ahead of us, and we are actually tied for 3rd place in the division with the Astros right now. Juan Ramos, new addition, leading the league in ribbies and 3rd in the league in OPS, so that is good to see, because we're going to need to start scoring some more runs and pitching better if we're going to guide this team back into the playoffs, and Ramos can certainly hopefully help us score more runs. And with that injury to Harimoto, another former first-round pick going to get to make his major league debut, Amari Raphael. Picked him 22nd overall in 2032 out of Piedmont College. He's also a guy we looked at 3 years earlier when he was a high school player. 25-year-old is 0-2, is a starter in AAA for us this year, but does have a reasonable 3.72 ERA. The issue with him is honestly not that different from the issue we saw with Mr. Deed. Is he going to be able to keep the ball in the park? Is he going to be able to avoid walking plate ball? Allowed 6 home runs and 15 walks in AAA this year. Don't think at this point Raphael is unfortunately really too large a part of our future. But while we've got 3 major league pitchers on the injured list, and we've moved on from a 4th in Mr. Deed, might as well try to get a little bit of a look in hopefully lower leverage, long relief mop-up situations from some of the young pitchers that we had been counting on to be the futures of our organization. And unfortunately, don't necessarily think that's going to occur with Pennyman and Raphael, but we'll know more as they get more of an opportunity here in the majors in the coming weeks. And some good news, Andy Brailovsky ready to come off of the IL. He was incredibly productive in the 21 at-bats that he's had for us with 10 hits, 249 WRC plus. Unfortunately, we haven't had him for the past few weeks as he's been banged up, but he's back in at first base, our number 2 hitter against both righties and lefties. Just won yesterday against Texas to push our record to 12-10. If we can beat Texas today, we'll actually take a series against the best team in our division and one of the best teams in baseball. So that would certainly be positive. And hopefully we can get to the month of May with a winning record. We'll finish off today. Unfortunately, we did lose to the mighty Rangers, but we'll see if we can do a little better against the Angels over the next few days before we get to May. And unfortunately, our bullpen just continues to be torn apart by injuries. Levi Sterling has some wrist soreness. It's going to have a moderate impact on his throwing. So no reason to keep him on the major league roster. But Curtis, Harimoto, O'Banner, and Sterling, all relievers who were part of the bullpen when this season started, who are now on the IL. So half of the bullpen that we started this season with is now on the injured list, and it's only April 28th. And we did end up sweeping that series against the Angels, so that pushes our record as of May 1st to 15-11. We do have the May 1st scouting reports here. You can see Doug Weiss lost a little bit of control, but his overall rating has improved. 1-1 record now with a 2.31 ERA and 23 1/3 innings in Las Vegas. I anticipate that he will be up by June 1st at the latest. He certainly is a better pitcher than some of the guys that we've brought up, but at this point we want to make sure if we're going to be manipulating his service time to guarantee that we have him for the next 6.5 years rather than the next 5.5 years. I want to make sure we keep him down there long enough that there's no execution risk as far as that. So Weiss should be joining us relatively shortly, but not quite yet. Month into the season, as we talked about, 15-11 record. We've closed the gap on the Rangers to 4, but more importantly than that, we're alone in second place in the division. We're actually 1 game up on the final wild card spot in the American League. Juan Ramos has been a revelation, 3rd in the league in hitting, leading the league in ribbies, 3rd in OPS. Jake Ortega is 3rd in batter WAR at this point. Take a look at some team statistics here in the very early stages of this season. Starters ERA has improved to 7th from 12th a year ago, so that's one of the key goals for the season that we've talked about. Overall, we're 6th in runs allowed, and certainly would hope that getting Deed out of the rotation and hopefully getting Weiss into the rotation in the not-so-distant future will ensure that we remain in the top half of the league in starters ERA. 3rd in the league in runs scored to go with that 6th in runs allowed. Pretty solid defense. So the 15-11 record that we have is actually one worse than expectations. We have had a lot more home than road games, 16-10 thus far this year, so that'll even out eventually. But the season is off to a respectable start, particularly given the fact that half of our bullpen remains on the injured list here as of May 1st. And although we just lost the final game of a series in the Bronx to the Yankees, did end up being a very big week. We swept that series against Los Angeles, as we talked about, and we took 2 out of 3 in New York. Jake Ortega, the American League Player of the Week, all he did was hit .565 with 3 homers and 10 ribbies and 23 at-bats for the year, hitting .339, 5 homers, 17 ribbies. So he's had a significant amount of his production over the past few games, and we talked about earlier, remains one of the top players in the American League in terms of the WAR that he's put up, thanks to his excellent offense and good, solid defense to go with good speed as well. Unfortunately, the first full week in April, not as successful. We lost 2 out of 3 in Chicago. We have taken 2 out of the first 3 against Baltimore. Final game in the series today, so hopefully we can take that series 3-1. Mike Curtis still not really recovering all that quickly from that forearm strain. Going to be another couple of weeks until he is potentially available for us, unfortunately. Levi Sterling's return is unknown. Chasen Harimoto out another 2 to 3 weeks. Fortunately, it does look like Kamani O'Banner is only a couple of days away. Hopefully he'll recover from that sore elbow soon, and we'll be able to get him back into the bullpen. And unfortunately, we did lose the final game of the series to Baltimore, so we split that series 2-2. So a losing week for us overall with a 3-4 record. 5 games out in the division, still a game ahead of the final wild card spot, but only 5-5 over our last 10. Hopefully things will get better over the next couple of weeks, although we've got the formerly powerful Kansas City Royals coming into town next. They're off to a rough start at 13-22. Hopefully we will keep them down. Ortega, with that recent surge, is now leading the American League in batter WAR. And we did fortunately have a better week as we head towards the middle of May. Took 2 out of 3 at home against Kansas City and then 2 out of 3 on the road against Seattle. So a 24-18 record, just 3 games behind. Importantly, we've got now at this point a couple of pitchers on rehab assignments. O'Banner's pitched 1 game down in AAA. So has Sterling, who came back from that injury. I believe his time frame was unknown when we checked in a while ago, although I feel like it might have been a couple of weeks and maybe he just got lucky and healed up earlier. But whatever it is, probably at the point now where we can start getting those guys back onto the major league roster. So we're going to take a look at the pitching staff, see how some of these guys have been doing. I guess we can do that right now for you. We had also brought up Jeff Harbaugh when we had the last injury, a 12th round pick in 2030. He hasn't allowed a run over 4 2/3 innings, 4 hits, 3 walks allowed. So his whip of 1.5, not particularly impressive, but he's also a guy who still has not allowed a run in the 10 games in his lifetime above the AA level. So he's proven to be reasonably effective, but like a lot of the pitchers in our organization, struggles with his control. Penniman and Raphael, neither doing particularly well for us. Penniman, 8 games, does have a 2-0 record, but a 6 ERA over 21 innings pitched. The BABIP only 237. He's been just below replacement level for us. 4 home runs in 21 innings is certainly a lot to allow. Raphael not really doing much better. No decisions over 6 games, 12 1/3 innings, 1 homer and 6 walks allowed, but a 5.11 ERA. His BABIP 333. He's basically been a replacement level guy for us. I think at this point, since Harbaugh, admittedly a small sample size, has actually performed a little better, we're going to send down Penniman and Raphael back to AAA where they'll get to start every day for us, and bring Mr. Curtis and bring Mr. Sterling back to the major leagues. Taking a quick look at the pitching staff here, you can see Sergio Campos, the new addition, with an ERA of over 7. Not working out the way that we would have hoped so far. His stuff, after we brought him on board and started scouting him, even though we had very high scouting accuracy, is not as great as we had hoped. That said, this is a guy who is a 2-time All-Star who's been, until he came to us, had been an above-average pitcher over the course of his major league career with a 102 ERA plus and an 86 FIP minus. Haven't seen that from him yet, but it is still a relatively small sample size at just 31 innings pitched. And we swept a brief 2-game series in Texas, which was good. We're only 2 games behind the Rangers right now, despite having lost our most recent game to Minnesota. Unfortunately, more injury issues. Chris Carl, another reliever, you may remember, he started the season with the injury. He was kind of the first of the guys on the injured list among our relievers. Strained back, going to keep him out for another couple weeks. So probably will mean that we go back to the well with Penniman or Raphael, but we'll see if there's any other options that we should think about considering. I guess with it being May 23rd, there's also consideration whether or not it's time to make the call to Doug Weiss. So we'll certainly think about and investigate that as well. And Weiss has pushed his record in AAA to 5-1, 2.17 ERA over 54 innings. Certainly not really much for the 24-year-old to prove at the minor league level. And I do think that with it being May 23rd. Hopefully the service time manipulation will work out well. We had intended to put him in the pitching staff. Campos pitched a little better last time out to get the ERA to 6.75. Actually, probably had a pretty good game to get the ERA to that level. Not incredible, but 2 earned runs over 5 innings, 2 earned runs over 6 1/3 the game before that. So he's had 2 of his better starts over his last couple as he's taken his ERA from 8.39 to 6.75. Certainly hasn't been a great start for Mr. Campos. Bobby Garland would be the other guy to pull from the rotation. He potentially, but he hasn't been as dominant as he was a year ago. But still 2-1 with a sub-4 ERA as a starter for us. So he's been a more than respectable number 5 starter for us. I do think it is time to bring Weiss up, but given Weiss's really good stamina, we are actually going to, I think, put him into the stopper role. It's a role that I haven't been able to use that much with the A's just because we haven't had pitchers that I like a lot. I don't love putting a fragile guy into that role, but I think with the aggressive tiredness hook, we can probably control that reasonably well. He's got good stamina. He's got a 3-pitch arsenal. It'll give him an opportunity to hopefully pitch in some high-leverage situations where he can add value to the team for us. And clearly, if we do have a opening in the rotation in the coming weeks and months due to ineffectiveness or injury, a good chance that Weiss will be the guy to fill that role. There's also maybe a small chance that his price might go down a little bit if he's being used as a reliever. Haven't checked in on what it would take to get him signed since we did that in a previous episode. I believe it was 10 years, and he was looking for $143 million. So he's come down a little bit, 10 years, $113 million, so being a little more reasonable. Again, given that he's never pitched in the majors and he's fragile physically, I don't feel a strong need to chase after a contract with him unless I'm pretty confident that it's going to be good value for us. And I don't think we're at that point right now. But we are going to promote Mr. Weiss finally to the major leagues for us. 4th round pick out of Austin P. Hopefully will be one of the more productive picks that we've made. Oh, and Weiss isn't even on the 40 roster, so I'm going to have a decision to make to get him there, but we'll certainly go ahead and do that. And we just shopped Jaheim Pennyman, and nobody offers a single player in return for him in a trade. It's definitely going to be an admission of failure as far as Pennyman's development as a former 2nd overall pick to drop him from the 40-man roster, but he's 26 years old, fragile, below average control. The injuries certainly have not helped. He had a torn flexor tendon in his right elbow in 2031 that cost him 6 months. And then he suffered the same injury in 2034 that cost him the season and a half that he's just coming back from. But hopefully nobody picks him up, and we can at least have him back in AAA, albeit not on the Major League roster anymore. I think it is an extremely low probability that he ends up being a useful Major League player, and probably a fairly low probability that he ever even pitches with us in the majors again, but always have a little bit of attachment to those guys that we made a real big investment in over the years, and sometimes through injuries, bad luck, ineffectiveness, or just the fact, particularly with high school pitchers, that a lot of them are not going to end up reaching their full potential. Doesn't work out with many of them, and Pennyman seems to be one of those situations, unfortunately. But the possible end with the Oakland organization of one high draft pick means an opportunity for another guy. Doug Weiss, going to be making his major league debut, one of the top prospects in our organization, one of the better prospects in baseball. Doesn't have much left to prove in AAA, and we'll see if he can give our bullpen a boost in that stopper role. And as we talked about, if we have any injuries in the rotation and Campos or Garland particularly end up struggling further, might not be that long till Weiss gets an opportunity to start some games for us as well. And Andy Brailovsky just suffered an injury, but a sore calf that hopefully will only impact him for a day, so that's not an issue. The Red Sox actually have claimed Jaheim Pennyman, so he is no longer a member of the organization. Wish him the best of luck in Boston. And our A's have been playing really well here in the month of May. We've pushed the record up to 31-20, and we are a game and a half ahead of the slumping Rangers. We're 8-2 in our last 10, 5 wins in a row. They are 3-7 in their last 10, so we are the second best team in the American League right now, behind only the White Sox, and fourth best team in baseball is the Reds, and the Giants have better records than us as well. Jake Ortega, third in the league in batting at this point. Juan Ramos leading the league in ribbies. Alejandro Landin is third. Ortega still leading the league in batter war. Jackson Ferris, 7-1 record with a 2.72 ERA. So our ace leading the league in wins and second in strikeouts, as we've been playing really good baseball of late. Talked at the top of the episode about how we were hoping to guide this team back into the playoffs this year, and that maybe we were being a bit underestimated by the experts, and thus far that seems like it may be the case. Also some good injuries. Chisun Harimoto about to start a rehab assignment. He's finally healthy, but he's been out since I believe like April 25th or so he's been out for more than a month, so we'll probably give him a couple of games to pitch in AAA before we look at making another roster move to potentially bring him back up. And Mike Curtis ready to begin a rehab assignment as well. So hopefully we will be back to the bullpen that we were hoping to have in the not too distant future, and might have a bonus in that bullpen with Mr. Weiss as well. And we've made it to June 1st, 8 consecutive victories, just swept a series against Cleveland at home after sweeping Tampa Bay at home. We also had that 4-2 road trip, swept Texas, and then split in Minnesota. So the team is playing as well as it has in quite some time at this point, as we sit here on June 1st, 2 months into the young season. 2.5 games up on the Rangers in the division as we try to finally topple them in the AL West after they've topped us 3 years in a row. Ramos and Landin still first and third in ribbies. Ortega still first in batter war, although his batting average has dipped to .324, and he's no longer in the top 3 in the league. Ferris has added another win, tied for the league lead with Steve Genus of Texas. Second in the league in strikeouts behind Genus, and Ferris with that 2.59 ERA is having what, if he keeps up this pace, will be the best season of his career at the age of 32. Take a quick look at the team statistics before we finish things up. The 34-20 record, one worse than expectations, which are 33-21. After the 15-11 April, even better in the month of May with that 19-9 record. The offense has been devastating. First in the American League in runs scored, and you can see we are first or second in the vast majority of batting categories. Pitching also much better this year, ranked 5th in the league in runs allowed. Starters ERA 6th, bullpen ERA 5th. Defensively, not as good as we have been in previous seasons, but if we're able to maintain the best offense in the American League with a pitching staff that's kind of in the top third, we should have a pretty successful season when all is said and done. We're not going to do our mid-season deep dive as far as statistics and how everyone's doing quite yet, but we will check in quickly. Campos has the ERA down below 6, so that's a modest amount of progress for Mr. Campos. You can see the month of April, ERA was 5.40. Actually, in May it was a little higher at 6.04, but perhaps looking at the pitching log, the game log, makes us feel a little better about what he's been doing because he has, as we talked about, pulled that ERA down from 8.39 to 5.77 over his past four starts. We've won each of those 4 starts, and he's gotten the W in 2 of them. So Campos has been certainly pitching better. And with a 3.08 ERA for the year, Bobby Garland certainly doing fine as a number 5 starter. Weiss positively, early returns on him are good as well. 4 games pitched, a couple of saves, 1 shutdown, allowed 6 hits, 2 walks over 7 innings with a 1.29 ERA. Obviously a pretty small sample size. And certainly the fact that he's got a 100% inherited runners scored percentage is not optimally what we're looking for from a stopper, but still has been a respectable start to Mr. Weiss' Major League career. Kamani Banner has an ERA of 3.66 at this point. He's the other new addition as well, and hopefully we will be getting a few more relievers back from the injury list in the not-so-distant future. It could honestly be within the next day or two, depending on what those guys have done down in AAA. But I'll be likely checking on that offline. Check in on a couple of the newer additions to the team. Brailovsky, who came up with us half of last season after we picked him up from Miami, hitting 340 and 144 at-bats for us, 168 WRC plus. Not expecting him to continue to be that great offensively, but certainly would be happy if he did produce at that level. Juan Ramos having a monster season for us, 312 average, 13 homers, 58 ribbies. Picking him up a year ago when he was out with that significant injury probably will pay off for us. Unfortunately, he's going to be heading towards arbitration, looking to make pretty good money. 5-year contract extension with him, $87 million over 5 years. So he's looking to kind of get fully paid for those potential free agent years in his 30s. At this point, might just be best to try to keep him through his ARB years and then see what happens. Alejandro Landin, unfortunately, diagnosis pending for the excellent young second baseman for us. Rodney Mesidor, not hitting for the same type of power that Colt Keith did, but we weren't expecting that. But he is batting .301, 6 homers, 23 ribbies, and 11 doubles in 146 at-bats. 136 WRC plus is not that far off from what we were often getting from Colt Keith. Certainly looking at his batting profile, not expecting him to continue hitting that way, but he has certainly been a lot better for us this year than he was in his first season, or part of his first season in Oakland. We know Jake Ortega, as always, is having a dynamite season, hitting .324 this year, 14 doubles, 10 homers. He's stolen 15 bases already, 158 WRC plus, and leading the league in batter WAR. Last guy we'll check in on quickly is Brady Harris, who could be in his final year with us, set to be a free agent after this season. Hitting .290, 8 homers, 32 ribbies, a 139 WRC plus. looking for 33 million plus a year over 7 years. We kind of thought he was always going to end up being a couple season rental for us in Oakland, and he's certainly a big contributor to the good offense that we've had thus far this season. But probably a guy that we will be moving on from for financial reasons at the end of this year. But 2 months into the season, things are going really well. Leading in the American League West by 2.5 games, and doing very well in our goals to achieve a winning record and improve our starting pitching earned run average. So 2 months into the 2036 season, things are going well for the Oakland A's, and we'll see if we can keep it going in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.